Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Heather Kelta-Gironi, Deputy Minister of Culture and Status of Women, and I'll be your MC for today's historic event. It is my honor to welcome you to this special announcement happening on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. I acknowledge all of the many First Nations, Métis and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Chief Leonard, standing on the road from Montana First Nation, Treaty 6 territory, welcome you to the podium to provide remarks.
Kakio te tamskat na to temte ki wamen niganis tamagiok o kakio te lapi ntota. I bring greetings to everybody, to all the relatives, the leaders, and all the people that are come here to participate in this great event for First Nations in Alberta. And I welcome you to the Treaty 6 territory. This is one of the events that's very historical for us. Because when I first heard about the Manitou Asinîy, when my friend Blaine was telling me about it, a lot of things that has to do with the history of us is hidden. And we learn from it bits and pieces from everybody else that has knowledge about the history. But this important event is for all of us, not only us First Nations, it's for the Canadians throughout, of how we survived all these atrocious events that we inherited. But because of this event and the acknowledgement that Premier Jason Kenney is going to present, it's helpful for us to keep on going to teach our young ones, the youth, to be able to carry on, because we're always talking about 7 generations. And it's up to us to set the stage for them to carry the movement forward towards the better quality of life, the changes that need to be made in government policies, but also in self-determination. And I'm very glad to be a part of this, even though I got involved in the latter part of this process. And all the individuals that were named today, I'd like to thank them. I can't name them all because I know I'll miss somebody. But once again, thanks again and welcome to Treaty 6. Hi, hi.
Thank you so much, Chief Leonard, standing on the road. The Manitou Stone, or Manitou Asinîy, which we stand beside, is of deep importance to the Indigenous communities throughout Alberta and Saskatchewan. Today is an extremely important day for the Royal Alberta Museum and Indigenous partners here with us. Our event will begin with a prayer by Elder Bastine of the Manitou Asinîy Iniskim Sahanî Center. We will then hear a few words from Premier Kenney, Minister Orr, and Elder Bastine. Now, I ask you to please join me in welcoming Elder Bastine of the Manitou Asinîy Iniskim Sahanî Center to the podium to offer a prayer.
Well, my prayer is just to honor today this rock. I had a meeting with Chief Roy Fox yesterday, and him and I go back a long ways, and it was quite intimate, our conversation. It was a very powerful meeting I had with him, and so at the end of the day, you know, the name, call it is Natuh Kutuk, Sacred Rock, and give it honor, and it's a prayer song for this event, for the rock, for all of us to move forward. You know, historically, you know, this rock, our connection to it was how we thrived and moved forward with the buffalo culture. And today, it'll give us direction and a new pathway into moving forward. And whatever that may be, you know, the whole world is turning upside down, you know. All you do is turn on the 6 o'clock news, and you know, the news is only horror stories we're seeing. You know, the kind of summers that we've had these past couple years. So, you know, it's my hope and my prayer and faith that this rock will assist us in moving forward to meet these new challenges, you know, whatever they may be. But therefore, in my mind, you know, they're for all of us. You know, and especially my brothers and sisters, all the First Nations and Indigenous peoples. You know, it doesn't need to be mentioned, you know, with a lot of emotion, but you know, we're suffering big time. You know, in all areas. You know, when it was prophesied that the rock, if it was moved, that we would suffer. And you know, I think historically it's been recorded when the rock was moved, smallpox, took us down. You know, and since then, a lot of things continue to keep us down. You know, we don't have to look very far, just across the street from where we're at, see some of it. But it's my hope, my faith and belief that tomorrow will be better for us, all of us. We all need to help one another. We all need the same things. We all want the same things. Manitou Stone,
Thank you, Elder Bastien. Next, we are pleased to be joined by the Honourable Premier Jason Kenney, who will speak on behalf of the Government of Alberta. Welcome, Premier.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Elder Bastien, for welcoming us in a special way, starting us in a good way. Thank you to Chief Leonard Standing on the Road for welcoming us here to Treaty 6 territory. Thank you to all the members of the First Nations who are joining with us here today as we mark National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Thank you to all of the people here responsible for their patient work to bring us to a truly historic day. The Manitou Stone, displayed behind me, also known as the Asinîy or Asinîy skin, arrived on North America as a meteorite millions of years ago. And when these lands were first inhabited by the Indigenous people of these territories, millennia ago, they saw this stone and recognized in it a special spiritual significance. Over the millennia and centuries, it became part of their life. It became inextricably part of the buffalo hunt on the Great Plains of the West. As the Blackfoot Cree and other Indigenous people gained much of their sustenance and centered much of their lives around the buffalo, this stone played a centrally important place, a place of connecting to the Creator, to their ancestors, to nature, and was of profound historical and spiritual significance to the people who first inhabited and cared for these lands. Sadly, in the 1880s, missionaries trying to stop what they regarded as pagan practices stole the stone, loaded it into a cart, took it to the Victoria settlement, and then shipped it on a train down to Toronto. We Albertans have a lot of reasons for Western alienation. That's one of them. And it was on display at a college in Toronto for nearly a century, until the elders of the First Nations came forward with the memory of the stone and said that must come back to where its original home. In 1972, it was returned to Alberta, and since that time, it has been in the custody of the Royal Alberta Museum. And I'd like to thank and acknowledge the museum for its good care and for working with First Nations to properly acknowledge us as the central part of this collection of Alberta's history. Over those years, there have been many efforts to return this sacred stone to the place where the Creator put it. And for the same reasons why it's difficult to get things done, nothing happened. A lot of talk, a lot of meetings, a lot of endless negotiations, a lot of good intentions, but no results. Several years ago, I was reading in a history book about Alberta, and I read for the first time about the Manitou Stone. I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't know about it before, but that's probably true for most Albertans. And that's one of the reasons we need this day of truth and reconciliation, in part, so that all of the people who are custodians and visitors to this land begin to know something of the story of the people who welcomed our ancestors here, of those who have built communities here and cared for the natural environment for thousands of years. And in this part of the world, this stone is central to that story. But it does not and should not belong to the government of Alberta. It does and must belong to the First Nations of these lands. And so, after a long journey, we are close to the destination. We are in the last part of the path when we sign this agreement for a joint stewardship of the Manitou Stone we will, as the government, formally cede ownership of this to the First Nations to whom it belongs in a joint stewardship agreement to ensure that it will be returned as close as possible to the place where it lay for millions of years, to the place where it attracted generations and generations of Indigenous people to sacred ceremonies, to the place where it represented the life of the Plains Indigenous people and their connection to nature, and particularly to the buffalo. There was a prophecy shortly after European contact from a chief, from an elder, that if this stone was not there, the buffalo hunt would end. Well, only a few years after it was taken, the buffalo hunt ended, and the lives of the people of these lands was forever changed. We cannot go back and undo history. We cannot wish away injustices, but we can, in humility, do our best to make things right, to seek reconciliation, as we did welcoming His Holiness Pope Francis on his historic pilgrimage of reconciliation to these lands just this summer. I had an opportunity to meet with the Holy Father, and after all of that, and told him about how this stone is so centrally important to the spiritual lives of the First Peoples and how we are returning it to its rightful place. I want to thank you, Leonard, but all of the people, they're here. If I start listing them, I'll miss people. But there are many people here. None of them came here seeking credit. Indigenous people who found partners from non-Indigenous backgrounds, elders, chiefs, grassroots people, historians, archivists, public servants, captains of industry, people of faith, have been cobbling together this society that we are creating today to be the custodian of this sacred rock. Through this joint stewardship agreement, we are committing, as the government of Alberta, working with the society, to build a prayer center. Now, unfortunately, many years ago, the actual site of the stone was destroyed in gravel mining. But we hope to find the most appropriate and proximate location to build the prayer center. The great Cree architect Douglas Cardinal has been contracted to design that sacred space, which will be primarily for the sacred use of First Peoples, so they can come there and reconnect with the sacred traditions of their ancestors. And others can come and see this important part of our shared history. The Society has as a second part of its vision to build an interpretive center at or near Hardisty, so that people can come to the area and learn more, not just about the stone, but about the way of life that it represented and represents. So this truly is, on this day of reconciliation, a deeply meaningful moment of reconciliation. I told you I read the history of this a few years ago. And when I was just beginning my own journey in Alberta provincial political service, and I said to myself very distinctly that this is something, a wrong that we must right. I was determined in my mind that we must work with the First Nations properly to honor this stone and its place in your history. And I have a confession to make. Like often, as leaders, I started with good intention, but then you get very busy. Chiefs, you know what that's like. Some of those things that are in your heart get crowded out by all of the urgencies and emergencies and crises. And I heard that we couldn't come to an agreement, that there had been failed negotiations, and that you know, well, I'll just put it out there. Our Blackfoot friends and our Cree friends and Athabasca friends and others couldn't necessarily agree on who should have custody of the stone and how to deal with it. And I don't know, maybe the government was using that to keep a hold of it. So that wouldn't be the first time we saw it divide and conquer, would it? But this latest effort, and I don't need to name names, you know who you are. You had the courage to move past all of that, to do what's right. I have to tell you, my deputy minister and other deputies here know how hard we have pushed for this day to come. I got to tell you, Blaine, a few weeks ago I thought the gig was up. I didn't think we were going to get it done. So I think today is a providential day. I don't think things like this happen by accident. So I want to give thanks to the Creator for helping finally to right the wrong of the theft of this stone and the theft of the culture and the way of life that it represented.
Thank you, Premier. I would like to welcome next to the podium the Honourable Minister of Culture, Ron Orr.
So good morning, everyone. What an incredible moment. A time that's been coming for many years and a time that will take more years to actually unravel what's sort of set in motion today and bring it to completion. I don't know how to begin to acknowledge all of the important people that are here today. Let me just maybe begin this way. A couple of weeks ago I was out at Enoch Cree and I was introduced to a young lady and a little guy who were the powwow royalty. And we visited and shared with them, really nice little children, visited with their mother. But they were the royalty. But today, I feel like I'm in the presence of true Alberta royalty. The many chiefs that are here, the many leaders of your nations and your people, you are the royalty of your people. And so I just want to acknowledge all of you and each of you. Thank you also for government to being here, previous government ministers, current ministers, departmental staff who have worked so hard on all of this. I'm just honored to be here on part of this historic occasion and share with you in part of this. And yes, Elder Bastien, I want to thank you for leading us in prayer. Earlier I was able to share with Elder Bastien a gift of tobacco, but the more important thing to me is that what your people bring back to our Western culture is an awareness of spirituality. And I thank you for always opening in prayer, for bringing us back to being able to talk about the Creator, about reintroducing that to a culture that has, in my opinion, in too many cases moved away from it. And so you are bringing back to us as well a great gift of spirituality that our people need as well, my people need as well as yours. So thank you for that very much. Manitou Asinîy is important to Alberta's shared culture. I find it fascinating that a stone from the stars, literally, something that transcends all of our cultures, all of our nations, all of our history, is something that can unite us and be a cause of us being united together. It was here long before any of us or any of our peoples were here. And I think it's important for us to recognize that sometimes some things are much bigger than we are, much more transcendent, and I just appreciate the fact that this gift from the stars, the influence it's had on Indigenous cultures can also help to unite us together with Western culture, and we together can work on this, and it becomes a moment of reconciliation and understanding and growing. So I just find that extremely important. It's part of the story of who we are, how we came to be, of where we are now, and how we can move forward with Indigenous partners and people. And so today we're announcing a process of returning the Manitou Stone to the Manitou Asinîy Iskim Saihai, I think I got that right, Center through a co-stewardship agreement. This has been a work that's been in progress on and off for many years, as people have as the Premier's already mentioned. One that has much more work to do, but I believe we have the process and the relationships and the important understanding in place in order to make that begin to happen. And I just want to say that, you know, it's interesting with the couple of starts that have tried to get this moving in the past. To me, it's poignant that you know, the government can't do this alone. We can't do this without you and you together, and all of you together with government. This is a cooperative process, and we need you, and we need your understanding from our part of it. I'm so thankful to the department staff that have been very helpful in every case I've heard. Thankful to the Manitou nonprofit that's been created, that has helped facilitate this conversation amongst peoples, all peoples that are participants. This is a great progress that we're making now, and the goal is to be able to return the Manitou Stone to its historical home, and ultimately to turn over the joint stewardship care of it to the Indigenous peoples who will know who do know and appreciate its sanctity. So that's the process we're on. That's what today is about. That's where we're going, and we will get there, because this stone is of great spiritual significance to the Indigenous peoples across this province. And today, through a co-stewardship agreement, this particular agreement of more than a year in the making, the government of Alberta is committed to assist the Manitou Centre in making this vision become a reality. This time it will happen. Repatriation is a part of a much larger journey for all of us towards reconciliation of many nations, many challenging issues, but we're on the path, and sometimes the journey is what it's all about. So we're on this journey. Manitou Asinîy is a sacred stone known for its healing powers, and this announcement is so much more than just symbolic. It is about healing. As I said, this gift from the stars is bringing to us healing even now as peoples, as nations. And so it is a sacred stone in that regard as well. It is a step for Albertans and Indigenous peoples to heal and move toward a brighter future. So thank you all, to the elders, the chiefs, the Indigenous community leaders, the center group that has come together to facilitate this in the background. Thank you for your work on this. Thank you, as I said before, to the department staff. Thank you to all of the team here at the Royal Alberta Museum for your care for this stone in past years, and for helping making this agreement possible. So thank you to all of you, and God bless.
Thank you, Minister Orr. I would like to now invite Elder Bastine back to the podium to speak on behalf of the Manitou Asinîy Iniskim Sahani Center.
Well, once again, I just want to express my, I'm just lost for words about how much I appreciate what has happened today. Premier Kenney, the Minister of Culture, your government, what you've done for us today, and then how you've helped, the First Nations and moving forward in economic development, education, health, child welfare, as I mentioned before. In my mind and what I do know about past relationships with the government, you moved mountains for us, Premier Kenney and your government, and appreciate it. And to you, my brothers and sisters that are here, appreciate all the support. I see in the back there, the first group I went to my Piikani Chief and Council, and they're back over there, and right off the bat, they said, we're behind you. They gave me a resolution, the biblical term BCR, They gave me a band council resolution, and they've been behind it all the way. So I just seen them show up, I guess keeping up with our culture, just a little bit late, but anyhow, they're here. I want to acknowledge Councillor Troy Knowlton and Councillor Doan Crowshoes. Anybody else back there? Okay, well, I'm glad you're here. I was beginning to feel neglected, hey, where's my guys? You're here. You're here, but anyhow, I appreciate everybody that's been, involved over the years. My children, the Horn Society, former chiefs, the work that's been done by the First Nations and everybody that's here that made this possible. Nothing but appreciation and, happiness. This is a day of celebration. Let's celebrate this together, in our heart and spirit, and look forward to a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Chief, Elder, I just promoted you. I wanted to just thank you. We have a protocol, a small gift from the museum of Asinîy. Yeah. And thank you so much. And I told you I was so honored just a few days ago. Your colleague, Wilton Goodstriker, gave me my Blackfoot name, Motsomita.
Yes.
He told me that's being named after his favorite horse.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge my daughter. She's been working here in Edmonton, and she does her weekly pilgrimage to this rock, and she's continued to keep that poke in the ribs for this day to happen. So I'm going to give this to you, my girl. Nicole, here you go.
Thank you, Elder Bastine. Now, if you could please direct your cameras to the table to my left, we invite Premier Jason Kenney and Elder Bastine to come forward to sign the co-stewardship agreement. I would like to extend one final thank you to the elders, knowledge holders, and communities who shared their wisdom with us, and our gratitude to the Manitou Asinîy Iniskim Sahani Center for their ongoing efforts. We look forward to future collaboration. Thank you for joining us this morning. This now concludes our formal program. And now there will be an opportunity for questions. Justin Bratinga, Press Secretary to Premier Kenney, will moderate the Q&A.
Thank you. We're going to start with media in the room. In keeping with the profound nature of today's announcement and the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, I do ask that you keep your questions on topic. There's a media microphone right there. It's moving to a more convenient location. Please line up at the mic, state your name and your outlet, and who you'd like to direct your question to. So I'll give you a few seconds for questions in the room. All right, I see a line forming. Go ahead.
Hi, this. All right.
Sure, just move it to the side there. Sure.
Oh, you go. You're doing great. Sorry about that. This question is either for Elder Bastien or the Premier, whoever is best suited to speak to it. There was mention of how there were sticking points of custody, and I'm just curious what in the end was finally able to cut through those sticking points. Sure. You had mentioned that there were issues and sticking points with custody. So sure. Ultimately, how were you able to come to an agreement?
Right. Thank you. So the stone was returned from Victoria College to Alberta, to the Royal Alberta Museum in 1972, which has had responsibility for it since then. And I understand that since then there have been various unsuccessful efforts to return it to Indigenous stewardship, but there was never an agreement. As you know, we have 3 treaty confederacies in Alberta. We have 45 different nations and tribes from different Indigenous backgrounds, and there was not a consensus. Let me be blunt with you. When we talk about consultation, it's not always just consultation between the Crown and Indigenous people as a kind of monolithic group. It's often it's between the Crown and all the different separate nations that have signed the treaties, and they don't always have the same opinion. And so there were different views about how and where to do this. This stone was very important historically to both the Blackfoot and the Cree people. And I don't think I'm saying something that's not well known, but those are people that had centuries of conflict. And so we hope that what's happening here is a reconciliation symbol, not just between the people of European descent and the Crown, but also between the First Peoples. I hope I'm not going out onto icy territory here, you guys. So, that just required some vision. And I want to thank, Blaine Favell, former chief of Poundmaker in Saskatchewan, who is now, I want to say, a proud Albertan, who comes from a Cree background, but who saw some of these problems and worked really patiently and diligently with the different nations, Cree, Blackfoot, Athabasca, Treaty 7, Treaty 6, Alberta, Saskatchewan, so that they could get a united approach to the government about one way to do this right. Now, the government also has resources, and so that's why we're staying involved in a joint stewardship agreement to make sure that the Crown is there to ensure that this has proper, safe stewardship for generations to come. And we're going to put some money behind that. We've put $500,000 in seed funding to help begin with the initial planning process, and there will be significant additional funding to follow to help the center finance the construction of both the prayer center and eventually the interpretive center. And you better get a transcript of this so you can show my successor and my successor's successor what I just committed to.
And this follow-up question would be for Elder Bastine. Just hoping to get a sense, this agreement has been signed, but once this stone physically returns to where it was taken from, if you can just walk us through that significance and how that will feel.
I think my age is beginning to show up. I didn't get half of the question. Maybe I'll go stand closer to you.
If you can just tell us a little bit about how you'll feel once this stone physically returns to where it was taken from.
I got a practical basis. We've been meeting, and we're planning on how we're going to utilize and access the stone physically, when it's brought to, I guess, the closest proximity to where it was moved from. And, with the spirit of love, spirit of unity, spirit of moving forward, that's the intent. And, that's, I can't say any more than that. I'm working with a gifted, wonderful group of people from government, from big business that's helping us, spiritual leaders here that are front and center here today, former chiefs. I see a go forward movement here.
Hi there. I'm not sure, Elder or Premier, who's best to answer. Looking for a bit of a timeline. How long do you expect this process to take? And has a site been determined, or you're still trying to come up with a site? Cost? What are the details that you can tell us?
Well, tomorrow.
You wish.
I think the site itself, has been pretty much determined. Again, we're at the table. We're talking some details. There's, I guess, part of the emotion of being very, very happy today. We've got some good people that are behind us. Some of them are in this room, and so I can only see things that are going to start moving. The minute we leave this room. Thank you.
And I'm with Elder Bastine. Look, it's a hugely important step forward today. We'd like to see the stone physically transported out there tomorrow, but we need to build the prayer center first so that it is properly housed and it is not subject to vandalism or theft. And you don't build something like that overnight, so it'll probably be a couple of years until the prayer center is, until we've dealt with land issues and design and construction. And that's the first phase, and so I hope this will be completed in a couple of years. But I also want to invite Blaine Favell up. I'm calling an audible here. He is a former chief of Poundmaker Reserve, and he's been playing a central role. He might.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you to all the speakers, the elders, the government, the Premier for this historic announcement. We started working on this a while ago, and the idea was I had heard the story that all of our tribes, before contact, I got along because we weren't starving, because we had buffalo. And we got along at that stone, and that I was taught from where I'm from that we had ceremonies with the Blackfoot and we got along, and that our people all prayed together. And that stone, where it was from the highest point on that hill, there was peace all around there. There was no fighting allowed there. So this stone is a place of peace and unity, and that spirit of love that Leonard talked about is what got us together. and keeps on keeping us together. So people always talk about, Blackfoot, Cree, they had conflict. Well, we did, but we did because we were starving, because all the buffalo were killed on purpose. So it's connected to this story. In terms of the facility itself, it's about a $7.5 to $10 million facility. It's being designed by Douglas Cardinal. It's a geodesic dome, so that's open to the sun and to the night. We'd like to get it going as soon as we possibly can. We're in final land negotiations. We're fundraising already. We've got some corporate donors in the room that are already giving us money to build the facility. We'd like all of Albertans and Canadians to get behind us for the fundraising, for the important work. And I think about the many hundreds of millions of billions of dollars that were invested in the destruction of our culture. I think to preserve our culture deserves a few million, to keep us around and to keep our elders to transmit our sacred teachings to our next generation. When we first had the meeting here, there was a difference. So the one premier said, we weren't really getting along for the land. It wasn't really that. It was also the museum didn't want to give it up. So there's been a change in spirit of the people, and I want to thank the people in the Department of Culture, the Royal Alberta Museum, for their change in attitude, particularly this woman, Heather, the Deputy Minister, because they're very committed to returning it. Before they weren't, and hence their spirit wasn't there. So now the spirit is there in a good way. Even when we first came here for the first ceremony, they had security guards outside. There was kind of intimidating us, and we told them that we had to stand by because there was a big brown truck, a FedEx truck that was going to pull up, and we're going to bring the stone down to. Boy, their faces just all got excited. So we made fun of them a little bit, but no, it's a good day. Thank you, and thank you, Premier, for asking me to say a couple of clarification words. Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit of background maybe for those who don't understand as well. This is a process, as has been said, has been a couple of years in the working, and what's happened is the Manitou Center has been created as a nonprofit organization. It's an organization that has a board of directors. The majority of the commitment is the majority of the board of directors will be Indigenous peoples. You are in the room here, those of you who are on that board, Indigenous leaders, and a few others who have been instrumental in trying to make this happen. So it's actually that society and that board that is overseeing and governing this, and everything you just heard is being under that umbrella, and they will continue to have the guidance and the oversight of it, a joint stewardship amongst the nations to oversee it under the direction of that joint stewardship board. So that's how that's happened, just for background information. And I'd also like to throw into, I do appreciate what you just said about the change of I guess, I don't know, while you use the word attitude with regards to the RAM. I would also like to thank the RAM and also just to affirm that a couple of weeks ago I also had the opportunity to go to Fort Chipewyan with the Athabasca people and return to them the original authentic Treaty 8 medal that has been housed here at the RAM for many years as well. So the government has relinquished all claim to it. It's been returned to them. I had the personal opportunity to return that to them and to meet with their elders and their chief in a ceremony, and that has also been returned in the spirit of reconciliation and to restoring our relationship together. So thank you to the RAM for facilitating that, along with some other things that were included at that time too, but the most significant piece was the Treaty 8 medal, which I was able to return to them. So thank you.
Premier, you mentioned that you brought this up with the Pope. This is a very specific item to bring up to His Holiness. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about that, and then also just the last year of reconciliation in general. We've seen a lot of different events throughout Alberta, so maybe you can reflect on the National Day.
Yes, well, it has been an historic year in reconciliation, and perhaps the most historic part of that was the visit of the leader of the Catholic Church to Alberta. 3 days he spent here. Not well. He told me that the visit was very difficult, and I could see that physically. I think we all could. But while he canceled, I think, 4 international trips this year, he kept this one because he said it was so important. And I thanked him for his visit. I told him how deeply meaningful it was to Indigenous people and how helpful it was to the broader work of reconciliation and let him know that we are doing our part as well, and told him about this sacred stone that is being returned to Indigenous stewardship. So I think he appreciated that, and was so touched with the welcome that he received at Masquachis and across the province. Let me say that things like this matter deeply, but reconciliation will never be achieved unless there's also reconciliation, and so it has to be more than symbols. It has to be real, concrete action, and we're seeing that happen. Just 2 days ago, we announced a game-changing investment that has 23 Alberta First Nations taking a serious ownership stake in 7 pipelines. I think most of the nations represented here will be receiving significant financial benefits from their equity participation in that, thanks to the Alberta Indigenous Opportunity Corporation that we created to provide backstop to so that nations that don't have deep balance sheets, big bank accounts, can actually buy into these big resource projects that develop the resources that lie below the lands of the First Nations that they first inhabited. And so that is game-changing. We were just down at the Blackfoot Confederacy, Minister Wilson and I, for our protocol meeting, and we'll be meeting with the G4 group of the of Treaty 7 on tomorrow, and making real tangible progress on education, on housing, on transportation, on economic development, and so really important things are happening. I know on this day there's going to be a tendency to focus on the injustices and tragedies of the past, but I hope we start to have at least some focus on the many positive and hopeful things that are happening in First Nations.
This question's also for you, Premier. So it's the second Truth and Reconciliation Day. Wondering if you feel now that Alberta made the right choice under your leadership in not recognizing the day as a statutory holiday and leaving it up to businesses to decide what they want to do.
Well, you know, we have, yes, I think this is an invitation for people to find a way to acknowledge the presence of Indigenous people on these lands, injustices that have been committed, but also to rededicate ourselves to the work of reconciliation. And I think having a day off where people end up going to the lake would not increase observance of this. We have Remembrance Day every November the 11th, where we remember 120,000 Canadian war dead, including Indigenous Canadians who gave up their lives for the defense of our country. For me, that is a sacred day. And people find a way, I hope, to go and memorialize that. But it's not a mandatory holiday. It is a day of remembrance, and that's what this is. And I think we can find very good, appropriate ways of acknowledging it without, you know, I had this problem thinking about whether we should make the day of the Queen's funeral a mandatory holiday. And I felt very passionately about recognizing her, so much so I went over there at my own expense and stood in a queue for 15 hours. But I just thought, if we actually were to do that, I don't think it would increase observance. It would increase park attendance. There'd be a lot of people out on boats and sleeping in, which is nice, but I don't think it would actually change observance. So I think we have to just work, it's a work of education to make people aware of the symbolic importance of this day.
This would be for Ron or Heather. Are there other artifacts that the museum is going to be reviewing ownership for? Do we have a number on that? What is the process like?
A couple comments I can make on that. There are quite a few artifacts here in the RAM. Some of them are current. Some of them are from as far back as the 1800s and others. We do have a Cultural and Religious Significance Repatriation Act. I should clarify that what's happening today does not happen under that act, because that relates primarily to artifacts that are important to a single nation. In this case, it's a cooperative group effort, so we have this special effort to be able to make this happen. We're open to conversations. We do have that one act in place for sacred and ceremonial objects, but you know, reconciliation includes many things, and there'll be other opportunities. We'll take them one-on-one as they become important to various individuals. As I said, the Athabasca Chippewa people were desiring to have their Treaty 8 medal back a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to return it to them. So we're open to those conversations. Some things it's appropriate, some things maybe the nations don't even necessarily want it. I mean, I think it's also important for nations to be able to share and have their culture, the educational value, the learning value, the awareness to the rest of the population as well, and some of that can happen here. There is an Indigenous Advisory Council here with the RAM Museum, and they continually give guidance on how those things should be presented in appropriate ways and help to share their culture with the rest of the world. So it's a conversation. Thank you.
I'll just add a word to that, which is that in the mid-90s, Alberta's legislature passed an act for the repatriation of Indigenous artifacts. And that gives us a legal framework for this, because it's not just the RAM. There are other provincial collections like the Glenbow that have Indigenous artifacts. Now, in some cases, Indigenous communities have come to say, please keep stewardship of these objects. You've got museum quality infrastructure and so forth. In other cases, they've said, we'd like this returned. And so we're trying to do that on a cooperative basis wherever possible, and to work with important Indigenous artifacts that are outside of the province. For example, Elder, I'm trying to think of his Yellow Old Woman down in, Herman Yellow Old Woman down in Siksika told me 3 years ago about the regalia of Chief Crowfoot that had been taken to England and were at the Exeter Museum in southwest England, and that they've been working for years to try to bring these regalia back, but they weren't getting anywhere. So about a month later, I was over there in Britain, and I was meeting people, and I met the culture minister in the British government. I called the mayor, I wrote letters, I raised a bit of a fuss, and I think that helped them to realize this was a big deal. And I'm pleased to say that 2 months ago, Crowfoot's regalia were finally returned to the custody of the Siksika people. Oh. And on the holiday, you know, a good example of what I was talking about is, you know, we could declare a mandatory holiday like the federal government did and go surfing in Tofino. I don't think that works so good.
Thank you. That concludes our questions from the floor. Operator, could you put through one on the phone?
There are no questions in the queue at this time.
Thank you. That concludes our press conference.
I couldn't help.